The clatter of cutlery against porcelain, the low murmur of conversations, the aromatic steam rising from sizzling platters, it all washed over Yan Xiaochen as she surveyed the bustling restaurant. Her gaze settled on a table near the back, a group of men boisterously celebrating. A flicker of calculation crossed her eyes, a subtle tightening of her lips. Tonight's target acquired. She smoothed an invisible wrinkle from her dress, an unconscious gesture that betrayed a nervousness she would never outwardly admit. Just another performance. She reminded herself. This was a game she played often, and played well. She moved through the room with the practiced grace of a seasoned predator, her heels clicking rhythmically against the polished floor. Each step was deliberate, each sway of her hips carefully calibrated. Doubt pricked at the edges of her confidence. What if they refuse? What if they laugh? The thought was quickly banished. She couldn't afford such weakness. They won't refuse. She repeated the mantra internally, steeling her resolve. She had an uncanny ability to read people, to sense their vulnerabilities, their desires. And these men, flushed with celebratory cheer, were ripe for the picking. As she reached the table, the boisterous laughter momentarily subsided, replaced by curious stares. Chen, the birthday boy, looked up, his face a mixture of surprise and mild annoyance at the interruption. His friends nudged him playfully, their expressions ranging from amusement to anticipation. Yan Xiaochen allowed a small, enigmatic smile to grace her lips. It was a calculated move, designed to disarm an intrigue. "Can I use a microphone, please?" Her voice was clear and melodious, cutting through the ambient noise. A ripple of murmurs went through the table. Chen blinked, momentarily speechless. This wasn't how these things usually went. Internally, Yan Xiaochen mocked his surprise. Men. So predictable. Her heart pounded a steady rhythm against her ribs, a mixture of excitement and a strange, almost addictive, thrill. This was her element, the stage where she felt most alive. Before Chen could formulate a response, she pressed on, her eyes sparkling with calculated mischief. "Tang Yen treats today. We can open a good bottle of wine, right?" The name, Tang Yen, hung in the air, a potent symbol of wealth and influence. Chen's classmates exchanged knowing glances. The mention of expensive wine and a generous benefactor clearly altered the dynamics. Chen hesitated for a moment, his gaze flickering towards his friends as if seeking approval. He's wavering. Yan Xiaochen observed his internal struggle with detached amusement. The subtle shift in his posture, the slight clenching of his jaw, these were all telltale signs. Across the restaurant, Monkey Key watched the scene unfold, his heart sinking with each passing second. He had been meticulously planning his next move with Yan Xiaocan, saving up for a special dinner, agonizing over the perfect gift. And now, watching her effortlessly charm another man, he felt a pang of familiar disappointment. She moves on so quickly. He thought bitterly, recalling her recent breakup. Yan Xiaocan, seemingly oblivious to Monkey Key's inner turmoil, continued her conversation with a nonchalant air, her words a stark contrast to the emotions swirling within him. Meanwhile, in another corner of the restaurant, Xiao Yuan nervously adjusted her blazer. Her upcoming job interview loomed large in her mind, a daunting hurdle in her path to financial independence. "Relax, Xiaoan," her friend, offered a reassuring smile. "You'll do great." But Xiao Yuan's anxieties were not easily assuaged. She replayed the potential interview questions in her head, her palms sweating despite the cool air conditioning. The thought of facing the intimidating interviewer, Cindy, sent a shiver down her spine. Unbeknownst to Xiao Yuan, Cindy, or Miss Xin as she preferred to be called in professional settings, was currently observing her from a discreet distance. Her sharp eyes missed nothing: the nervous fidgeting, the slight tremor in Xiao Yuan's voice as she spoke to her friend. A lack of confidence, but also a certain honesty. Miss Shin mused, her thoughts drifting to the troublesome issue with Han Wang and the pending deal with Deng. She made a mental note to discuss the matter with Chengji, the enigmatic figure who seemed to have a hand in everyone's affairs. Chengji, meanwhile, was on the phone, his voice low and measured as he spoke to someone about Yan Xiaochen. "Ensure everything goes smoothly," he instructed, a hint of steel in his tone. His motives remained shrouded in mystery, his actions a complex web of influence and manipulation. He seemed to be orchestrating events from behind the scenes, a puppet master pulling the strings of fate. Back at Chen's table, the atmosphere had shifted. Under the combined influence of peer pressure and Yan Xiaochen's persuasive charm, Chen finally relented. A reluctant smile spread across his face. Well, why not? He thought, the celebratory mood and the promise of good wine overriding his initial hesitation. He glanced at Yan Xiaochen, a flicker of genuine amusement in his eyes. This woman was certainly something else. As the waiter uncorked the expensive bottle of wine, Xiao Yuan's phone buzzed. It was a message from Miss Shin, rescheduling the interview due to an urgent matter involving Li Wei and President Ho. A wave of relief washed over Xiao Yuan, followed by a strange sense of anticipation. She had bought herself some time, a chance to compose herself and perhaps even seek advice from the ever-resourceful Chengji. The night continued to unfold, a tapestry of intertwined lives, each character caught in their own personal drama. Yan Xiaochen, having secured her dinner date, allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. Another victory. She thought, her gaze sweeping across the room, already searching for her next conquest. The restaurant, a stage for human interaction, echoed with unspoken desires, hidden agendas, and the constant hum of fate's intricate design. The clatter of cutlery against porcelain, the low hum of conversation, the rich aroma of sizzling garlic and ginger, it all faded into a hazy backdrop as Yan Xiaochen approached the table. Her steps were measured, her posture radiating an almost unnerving confidence. Chen, mid-sentence, felt his voice trail off, a curious stillness settling over their celebratory gathering. His friends, Apple among them, followed his gaze, their faces a mixture of surprise and amusement. He had just been talking about Yan Xiaochen, about the gnawing emptiness he felt since their breakup, the futile attempts of Monkey Key to mend his broken heart. Now, this woman, a stranger with eyes as sharp as obsidian, was standing before them, her presence a sudden shift in the atmosphere. This is unexpected, Chen thought, a flicker of annoyance warring with a burgeoning curiosity. Birthdays were meant for familiar faces, for shared memories and comfortable silences. Not for this. This almost theatrical interruption. He could practically hear Monkiki's thoughts echoing his own, a silent groan of really? Now. As the unspoken question hung heavy in the air, what did this woman want? Yan Xiaochen's lips curved into a smile, a subtle yet disarming expression that seemed to take the edge off her bold approach. "Hello, gentlemen," she began, her voice smooth and clear, cutting through the restaurant's ambient noise. "I want to invite you to have a meal with me very sincerely." A pause, just long enough to let the words sink in, to gauge their reactions. Chen could see a ripple of bewilderment pass through his friends. He himself felt a tightening in his chest, a strange mix of discomfort and intrigue. He couldn't deny, there was something captivating about her directness, her unwavering gaze. "I got the restaurant," she continued, her gesture encompassing the elegant space around them, "the time is literally up to you." This was no casual request. This was a calculated move, a play of audacity that bordered on the absurd. Chen's initial annoyance began to give way to a grudging admiration. He glanced at his friends, their expressions ranging from open-mouthed shock to suppressed laughter. He knew what they were thinking. This was either incredibly brazen or borderline insane. He, however, found himself leaning towards the former. Internally, Yan Xiaochen registered their hesitation, the subtle shifts in their body language. She had anticipated this. It was part of the game, this initial resistance. Men, she mused, so easily flustered by a little forwardness. It was a game she had played before, and played well. She knew how to navigate the nuances of male psychology, to turn skepticism into acceptance, reluctance into eager anticipation. The Peking duck here is exquisite, she added, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, and the chef's special sea-based divine. She painted a vivid picture with her words, the succulent flavors, the delicate aromas, the sheer indulgence of the experience. It was a calculated tactic, an appeal to their senses, their inherent desire for pleasure. She could see it working, the subtle softening of their expressions, the flicker of interest in their eyes. Chen swallowed, his mouth suddenly dry. He had been vaguely aware of the restaurant's reputation, but hearing her describe it, the words imbued with such genuine enthusiasm, he found himself strangely drawn in. He glanced at Apple, who shrugged, a playful smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. It was Apple who broke the silence, his voice tinged with amusement. "So, are you saying this is all on you?" Yan Xiaochen's smile widened. "Absolutely," she replied, her voice ringing with confidence. "Consider it a celebration." She paused, letting the word hang in the air, pregnant with unspoken meaning. A celebration of what, exactly? Chen wondered. His birthday? Her boldness? The sheer absurdity of the situation? He looked at his friends, their faces a mixture of curiosity and amusement. He could feel the tide turning, the initial resistance giving way to a grudging acceptance. Perhaps, he thought, a little absurdity was exactly what they needed. It certainly beat dwelling on Yan Xiaocan's indifference, on the hollow ache in his chest. "All right," he said finally, a reluctant smile spreading across his face. "Why not?" Across town, Xiao Yuan clutched her phone, her knuckles white. The interview with Cindy had been an experience. She'd fumbled her answers, her carefully rehearsed responses dissolving into a nervous stammer. She'd confessed her flaws, her tendency to procrastinate, her occasional bouts of self-doubt. She hadn't meant to be so honest, so vulnerable. But Cindy, with her piercing gaze and unnervingly calm demeanor, had a way of drawing the truth out of her, peeling back the layers of carefully constructed composure. Xiaowen's voice on the other end of the line, a soothing balm to her frayed nerves, "You did what you thought was right. Being truthful always beats wearing a mask." "Mr. Ching assures me it will work out," Xiao Yuan mumbled, clinging to the thread of hope that the influential figure offered. He had a way of making things happen, of pulling strings she didn't even know existed. Meanwhile, Cindy sat across from Han Wang, her expression unreadable. "The dang deal is off," she stated flatly, her voice devoid of emotion. "Li Wei's incompetence cost us." Han Wang flinched, his own anxieties mirroring Xiao Yuan's earlier distress. He knew Miss Xin would not be pleased. He knew that this failure would reverberate through the company, reaching the ears of President Ho himself. The thought sent a shiver down his spine. Back at the restaurant, Yan Xiaochen orchestrated the seating arrangements with an almost military precision. She placed Chen at the head of the table, flanking him with his most boisterous friends, ensuring a lively atmosphere. She herself chose a seat that allowed her to observe the entire group, to gauge their reactions, to subtly steer the conversation. She felt a thrill of satisfaction, a sense of control. This was her element. This was where she thrived. As the waiters began to bring out the dishes, a cascade of culinary delights, Chen raised his glass. "To unexpected encounters," he said, his gaze meeting Yan Xiaochen's. She returned his gaze, a knowing smile playing on her lips. She thought of Zhou, of the intricate web of connections that had led her to this moment, to this table, to these men. She had her own reasons, her own agenda. But for now, she would savor the victory, the subtle shift in power, the unspoken understanding that had passed between them. The game was afoot, and she, Yan Xiaochen, was playing to win. The arrival of President Ho, a figure of quiet authority, brought a new layer of complexity to the scene, the subtle undercurrents of power and influence swirling beneath the surface of polite conversation. The remnants of laughter still clung to the air, a faint echo of the earlier boisterous birthday celebration. Chen swirled the last of the melted ice in his glass, the clinking a lonely sound against the backdrop of hushed conversations. He watched his classmates, their faces illuminated by the warm glow of the restaurant's lights, a mixture of disbelief and amusement dancing in their eyes. She really did it, he thought, a reluctant smile tugging at the corners of his lips. She actually asked me out, right in front of everyone. He could still feel the heat rising in his cheeks, the unexpectedness of her proposition catching him off guard. It wasn't the invitation itself, but the sheer audacity, the unwavering confidence in her eyes that had left him speechless. What the hell? Apple's voice, laced with incredulity, broke through Chen's reverie. She is seductive. So bold. He shook his head, a low whistle escaping his lips. Chen's gaze drifted towards the empty chair where Yan Xiaochen had been sitting, a ghost of her perfume lingering in the air. He remembered the way she had leaned in, her words a silken whisper against the rising clamor of the restaurant, yet somehow cutting through it all with a razor-sharp clarity. Direct. Unflinching. He hadn't encountered anyone quite like her before. Seriously, another classmate chimed in, I've never seen anything like it. A ripple of agreement spread around the table. Chen could hear snippets of their conversation, so forward, imagine the guts, does she do this often, each comment adding another layer of bewilderment to the already surreal situation. He felt a strange mix of flattery and embarrassment. Flattery, because her attention, so blatant and unapologetic, felt strangely validating. Embarrassment, because he, Chen, usually so composed and articulate, had been reduced to a stammering mess under her unwavering gaze. Monkey Key sighed, the sound heavy with resignation. He picked at the remnants of his cake, the frosting smeared across the plate a metaphor for his own disheveled emotions. And here I am, he muttered, more to himself than anyone else, pining after Yan Xiaochen for months, and she's already moved on. To Joe, apparently. Some guy she met at a yoga retreat. The words hung in the air, thick with unspoken disappointment. Chen patted Monkey Key's shoulder, a gesture of comfort that felt inadequate. He knew how much Monkey Key had cared for Yan Xiaochen, how he had poured his heart and soul into winning her affection. To see him so dejected, so utterly defeated, was a pang of sympathy in Chen's chest. He thought about Yan Xiaochen, her carefree laughter, her seemingly unbreakable spirit. He couldn't imagine the kind of pain that could leave her so unaffected, so quick to move on. Perhaps she's just good at hiding it, he mused, or maybe she just protects herself differently. It's her loss, man, someone offered, a feeble attempt at consolation. Monkey Key offered a weak smile, the expression not quite reaching his eyes. He pushed his plate away, the uneaten cake a symbol of his lost appetite. Chen's thoughts drifted back to Yan Xiaochen. He recalled the glint of challenge in her eyes, the subtle curve of her lips as she delivered her proposition. He wondered what motivated her, what drove her to pursue men with such relentless determination. Was it a game? A challenge? Or was there something more beneath the surface, something hidden beneath the mask of confidence? The image of her face, framed by the soft restaurant lighting, flashed in his mind. He remembered the way her voice had softened, almost pleading, as she uttered the words that had changed the course of the evening. Really, I really want to invite you to dinner very sincerely. Could you please? The sincerity in her voice, so starkly contrasted with her earlier boldness, had struck a chord within him. He looked around at his friends, their faces a mixture of curiosity and anticipation. He knew they were waiting for his response, their eyes fixed on him, silently urging him to accept. He took a deep breath, the lingering scent of her perfume filling his lungs. He thought about the evening stretching ahead, the unknown possibilities, the potential for something. He pushed his chair back, the scraping sound echoing in the sudden lull of conversation. "All right," he said, his voice surprisingly steady. A collective gasp rippled through the group, followed by a chorus of excited whispers. He met their gazes, a flicker of amusement in his eyes. "What the hell," he thought, echoing Apple's earlier sentiment. "Why not?" He felt a sudden surge of adrenaline, a thrill of anticipation coursing through his veins. He had no idea what the evening held, but for the first time in a long time, he felt alive. The heavy oak door swung inward, revealing the warm glow of the private dining room. Chen gestured for his classmates to enter, a slight tightness in his chest. He hadn't anticipated such a large group, but Yan Xiaochen had a way of rearranging plans, of bending situations to her will. He caught her eye for a fleeting moment, a spark of something unreadable in her gaze before she turned her attention to another classmate, her laughter echoing off the polished wood panels. "She's enjoying this," he thought, a strange mix of irritation and admiration swirling within him. He wondered, not for the first time, what drove her, this relentless pursuit of what? A free meal? A challenge? He pushed the thought aside as the room filled with the chatter and laughter of his friends. The air, thick with the aroma of simmering spices and aged wine, hummed with a nervous energy. Apple, ever the boisterous one, clapped Chen on the back, her voice loud enough to momentarily silence the room. "Happy birthday, old man. This place is fancy. Did you rob a bank?" The tension eased into a collective chuckle, and the room buzzed with conversation once more. Chen forced a smile. He had chosen this restaurant specifically for its quiet elegance, hoping for a more intimate celebration. Now, with Yan Xiaochen's presence and the sheer number of guests, the atmosphere felt different. He glanced at the long, heavy table, its surface gleaming under the soft light. "Our table is made of logs," he thought wryly, remembering his earlier comment. "I guess someone will have indigestion." Gifts were exchanged, the usual assortment of ties, wallets, and novelty items. Chen accepted them with a polite smile, his mind still preoccupied with Yan Xiaochen's unexpected arrival. He watched her from the corner of his eye, her effortless charm captivating the attention of several of his male classmates. She moved through the room like a gentle current, subtly directing the flow of conversation, the center of an unwitting vortex. As the evening progressed, the conversation drifted towards relationships, the inevitable topic amongst a group of young adults. Someone mentioned Yan Xiaocan, a mutual friend, and her recent breakup. Chen listened with a detached interest, his gaze settling on Monkey Key, whose face had paled slightly. He knew Monkey Key harbored feelings for Xiaocan. He'd witnessed the subtle glances, the hesitant touches, the unspoken longing that hung heavy in the air whenever they were together. "So unbelievable," Apple exclaimed, her voice laced with disbelief. "Yaowen just broke up with Shanho." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken implications. Chen saw Monkey Key flinch, his hand tightening around his glass. He knew what Monkey Key was thinking. Xiaocan was available again. A sliver of hope, fragile and easily crushed, must have flickered within him. Chen felt a pang of sympathy for his friend. He knew Monkey Key's quiet, persistent affection, and he also knew Xiaocan's fickle nature. He wanted to warn him, to tell him to protect his heart, but the words caught in his throat. Some lessons, he knew, could only be learned through experience. Later, as the initial flurry of greetings and gift-giving subsided, Chen found himself alone with Yan Xiaochen for a brief moment. She leaned against the wall, a glass of wine swirling in her hand, her eyes fixed on him with an unnerving intensity. "Really awesome," she murmured, a sly smile playing on her lips. It's so hard for him to refuse you. Chen felt a flush creep up his neck. He wasn't sure what she was referring to: the dinner, the entire evening, or perhaps something else entirely. Her words hung in the air between them, charged with a meaning he couldn't quite decipher. He opened his mouth to reply, to ask her what she meant, but she simply smiled again, a knowing glint in her eyes, and turned away to join another group. He was left standing there, a strange mixture of confusion and fascination churning within him. The thought of Yan Xiaocan and her seemingly endless string of relationships resurfaced in Chen's mind. He wondered how someone could move on so quickly, so effortlessly. Was it a defense mechanism, a way to avoid the pain of genuine connection? Or was it something else entirely, a restlessness, a constant search for something that remained just out of reach? He glanced at Monkey Key, who was now engaged in a forced conversation with another classmate, his smile strained, his eyes distant. Chen sighed inwardly. He knew Monkey Key would likely pursue Xiaocan again, despite the inevitable heartbreak. He wished he could offer him some words of wisdom, some solace, but what could he say? That love was a battlefield, a gamble with no guaranteed winnings. He knew Monkey Key wouldn't listen. Sometimes, the heart wanted what it wanted, logic and reason be damned. The evening continued, a tapestry of interwoven conversations and unspoken tensions. Chen observed it all, a silent observer in the midst of the swirling chaos. He saw Xiao Yuan, another friend, nervously fidgeting with her phone, her eyes darting towards the door. He knew she was waiting for a call back from a job interview, a crucial step in her career path. He overheard snippets of her conversation with Xiaoan, her voice a mix of anxiety and forced optimism. He admired her resilience, her determination to succeed despite the challenges she faced. The image of Yan Xiaochen, her confident stride and unwavering gaze, flashed across his mind. He realized that, despite her unconventional methods, there was a strength, a certain audacity, that he couldn't help but admire. Perhaps it wasn't about the free meals, or the attention, but rather a desire to control her own destiny, to carve her own path in a world that often tried to dictate its terms. He watched her as she laughed, her head thrown back, her voice ringing out above the din of the restaurant. He realized, with a sudden clarity, that he didn't fully understand her, but he was undeniably intrigued. He knew, with a certainty that surprised even himself, that their paths would cross again. The fluorescent lights of the interview room hummed, a dull, insistent drone that mirrored the flutter of anxiety in Xiao Yuan's stomach. The stark white walls seemed to close in, amplifying the silence between questions. Across the polished table, two women sat, their expressions carefully neutral. One, Cindy, held Xiao Yuan's resume, her finger tracing the lines as if deciphering a secret code. The other, Miss Xin, observed Xiao Yuan with an unervingly direct gaze. Xiao Yuan tugged at the hem of her skirt, a nervous habit she hadn't been able to break, even after hours of practicing in front of the mirror. Just breathe, she told herself. You've prepared for this. You know your strengths. According to your resume, Cindy began, her voice smooth and professional, you graduated from the finance department at BGI, right? Why did you choose the financial industry? The question was standard, expected. Xiao Yuan had rehearsed her answer countless times, but the words felt stiff and rehearsed as they left her lips. I've always been fascinated by the intricate dance of numbers, the way markets shift and react. The financial world offers a unique blend of analytical thinking and strategic planning, which aligns perfectly with my skill set. Too formal. Did that sound robotic? She worried, catching Miss Xin's unwavering gaze. It felt as though the woman was peering straight through her carefully constructed facade, dissecting her thoughts and motivations. Interesting, Miss Xin finally spoke, her voice low and resonant. And what specific experiences have shaped your interest in this field? Xiao Yuan hesitated, her mind flashing back to her internship at McGee Capital. Long hours, demanding tasks, and the constant pressure to perform. It hadn't been glamorous, but it had been a crucial learning experience. In terms of experience, she began, choosing her words carefully, I do have a gap, but I have internship experience at McGee Capital before. The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken details. Should I have elaborated more? She could feel the sweat prickling at her palms. Cindy's eyes flicked to a particular section of the resume. Your academic record is impressive, except for one anomaly. A failing grade in ethics. Care to explain? Xiao Yuan's breath hitched. The air in the room seemed to thicken, suffocating her. That single blemish on her otherwise spotless record. The ghost of that mistake, one she had tried so hard to bury, was now resurrected, staring her in the face. 1,000 justifications, excuses, and carefully crafted explanations flooded her mind, each one more flimsy than the last. She swallowed, the silence stretching into an unbearable eternity. Lie. Downplay it? Or tell the truth? The weight of Miss Shin's gaze pressed down on her, an unspoken demand for honesty. I helped a classmate cheat on an exam, she confessed, the words barely a whisper. The admission hung in the air, raw and exposed. Her heart pounded against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence. She braced herself for the inevitable judgment, the rejection. It's over, she thought, the despair a cold knot in her stomach. They'll never hire me now. Miss Shin leaned forward, her expression unreadable. And why did you do that, Ms. Yuan? Xiao Yuan closed her eyes briefly, gathering the remnants of her composure. He was struggling. His family, they depended on him getting a scholarship. I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't stand by and watch him fail. The words tumbled out, a torrent of suppressed emotions. It was a terrible lapse in judgment, one I deeply regret. I betrayed the trust placed in me, and I compromised my own integrity. I've learned from that mistake, and I can assure you, it will never happen again. She opened her eyes, meeting Miss Shin's gaze directly. There was a flicker of something in the woman's eyes, something that resembled understanding. The silence stretched, punctuated only by the hum of the fluorescent lights. Xiao Yuan held her breath, waiting for the verdict. Each tick of the clock felt like an eternity. Finally, Miss Shin spoke, her voice softer now. Thank you for your honesty, Ms. Yuan. She glanced at Cindy, a silent exchange passing between them. We'll be in touch. Later, as Xiao Yuan replayed the interview in her mind, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had failed. The confession, the raw vulnerability she had displayed, felt like a fatal mistake. She slumped onto a bench outside the building, the weight of her anxiety pressing down on her. Xiaoan, her friend, found her there, her face etched with concern. How did it go? Xiaoan asked, her voice gentle. Xiao Yuan shook her head, unable to articulate the turbulent mix of emotions swirling within her. I don't know, she whispered, the words laced with despair. I confessed. I told them everything. Xiaoan sat beside her, placing a comforting hand on her arm. Sometimes, honesty is the best policy, she said softly. Even if it doesn't feel like it in the moment. Xiao Yuan looked at her friend, a sliver of hope piercing through the clouds of doubt. Maybe, just maybe, there was still a chance. But deep down, a nagging voice whispered, it's over. You blew it. The uncertainty was a heavy burden to carry, but she knew, with a chilling certainty, that the consequences of her past actions would continue to ripple through her life, shaping her future in ways she couldn't yet comprehend. The interview was over, but the real test had just begun. The biting chill of the late autumn air nipped at Xiao Yuan's exposed cheeks, a stark contrast to the stifling nervousness she'd felt just moments ago within the sterile confines of the interview room. She pulled her thin jacket tighter around herself, the flimsy fabric offering little solace against the wind that whipped through the towering skyscrapers of the financial district. Her breath plumed out in ghostly white puffs, mirroring the uncertainty that still swirled within her. Xiaowen, her ever-supportive friend, stood beside her, a comforting presence amidst the impersonal steel and glass. "How was it?" Xiaowen asked, her voice laced with concern. "Is it over? You look pale." Xiao Yuan managed a weak smile. "It's over," she breathed, the word escaping her lips like a sigh of relief. "But I don't know." She replayed the interview in her head, each question, each answer, each flicker of expression on the interviewer's Cindy's face. Had she come across as too naive? Too inexperienced? The thought gnawed at her, a familiar anxiety clawing its way up her throat. Cindy's sharp gaze, her pointed questions about Xiao Yuan's supposed character flaws as noted by Mr. Cheng, the man who'd seemingly orchestrated this entire interview, it all felt like a thinly veiled test, one she wasn't sure she'd passed. Xiaowen squeezed her hand, the warmth a welcome anchor in the sea of her apprehension. "Don't overthink it, Xiao Yuan. You're brilliant, you know that. Anyone would be lucky to have you." "Easy for you to say," Xiao Yuan mumbled, her gaze fixed on the swirling patterns of fallen leaves caught in the wind. "You haven't met Cindy. She sees right through you. Like she's peeling back layers, looking for the cracks." The image made Xiao Yuan shiver, a deeper chill settling in her bones. Mr. Cheng's words echoed in her mind. "Cindy knows your weaknesses. Be honest." But honesty felt like a double-edged sword. It could be disarming, yes, but it could also be a weapon turned against you. They walked in silence for a few moments, the rhythmic click of Xiaowen's heels on the pavement a steady counterpoint to the chaotic rhythm of Xiao Yuan's thoughts. She thought of Yan Xiaochen, that audacious woman who'd somehow managed to secure not one, but several dinner dates with complete strangers, seemingly effortlessly. Was that the kind of confidence she needed? The kind that bulldozed through doubts and insecurities, leaving a trail of bewildered admirers in its wake? Her phone buzzed in her pocket, a jarring interruption to her internal debate. She fished it out, her heart leaping into her throat as she saw the caller ID. It was Cindy's office. Her fingers trembled as she pressed the answer button. "Hello," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Miss Xiao Yuan," a crisp, professional voice answered. It wasn't Cindy, but one of her subordinates, Han Wang, if she remembered correctly. "Miss Xin would like to speak with you." "Just one moment, please." The brief pause felt like an eternity. Xiao Yuan held her breath, her mind racing. Was this it? The rejection? The polite but firm dismissal that would send her spiraling back into the abyss of unemployment? Xiaowen's hand tightened on hers, a silent offering of support. Then, Cindy's voice, cool and composed, filled her ear. "Xiao Yuan. I just wanted to say congratulations. You're hired. You can start work tomorrow." The words hung in the air, suspended between disbelief and elation. Xiao Yuan stared at Xiaowen, her mouth agape, unable to process the sudden shift in her reality. Hired? Just like that? After all the anxiety, the self-doubt, the agonizing replay of every perceived misstep, she was hired. Xiao Yuan. Cindy's voice, laced with a hint of amusement, broke through her stupor. "Are you still there?" "Yes. Yes, I am," Xiao Yuan stammered, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you, Miss Xin. I won't disappoint you." The words felt inadequate, a pale reflection of the gratitude and relief that surged through her. "I'm sure you won't," Cindy replied, her tone softening slightly. "Mr. Cheng spoke highly of you. And despite certain flaws, I believe you have potential. The mention of Mr. Cheng brought a fresh wave of curiosity. What exactly had he said about her? And what did Cindy mean by certain flaws? The questions lingered, a subtle undercurrent beneath the surface of her relief. As she ended the call, a faint smile touched Xiao Yuan's lips. She turned to Xiaoan, her eyes shining with a newfound confidence. I got the job, she said, the words imbued with a quiet strength she hadn't possessed just moments ago. Xiaoan whooped with delight, pulling her into a celebratory hug. I knew you would, she exclaimed, her voice ringing with genuine happiness. See? I told you not to worry. But beneath the surface of her joy, a flicker of unease remained. Mr. Cheng's influence, Cindy's discerning gaze, the unspoken expectations, it all pointed to something more complex than a simple job offer. This was just the beginning, Xiao Yuan realized, a single step into a world of intricate relationships and hidden agendas. And she had a feeling it was going to be a long, complicated journey. The image of Yan Xiaochen, navigating the complexities of her own pursuits with such brazen confidence, flashed through her mind. Perhaps, she thought, a little bit of that audacity wouldn't hurt. The remnants of the day clung to the city like a half-remembered dream. Monkey Key stared blankly at the dregs of his lukewarm coffee, the bitter taste mirroring the unsettling feeling in his gut. He'd seen Yan Xiaochen, that whirlwind of a woman, sweep Chen away with an almost frightening efficiency. He replayed the scene in his mind, the way she tilted her head, her laughter ringing out like a challenge, the almost predatory gleam in her eyes as she locked onto her target. It wasn't just about the free meal, he knew that. There was something else driving her, a hunger that went deeper than a rumbling stomach. He thought of Xiaocan, her casual dismissal of their past, the shrug of her shoulders that had seemed to erase months of shared laughter and whispered secrets. Had she ever truly cared? The question gnawed at him, a dull ache that spread through his chest. He wondered if he was simply a stepping stone, a placeholder in the grand narrative of her life. Xiao Yuan's phone buzzed in her pocket, a jarring interruption to the quiet hum of the bus. It was Xiaoan, her voice bubbling with excitement. So. How did it go? Spill all the details. Xiao Yuan hesitated, the memory of Miss Shin's piercing gaze still fresh in her mind. The interview had been a whirlwind, a chaotic blend of awkward silences and pointed questions. She'd stumbled, yes, admitting her lack of experience with a candor that surprised even herself. But there had also been a flicker of something else in Miss Shin's eyes, a grudging respect perhaps, for her willingness to own her shortcomings. It was interesting, she finally said, her voice betraying none of her inner turmoil. Xiaoan, however, was not easily deterred. Interesting how? Did you get the job? Did you charm the pants off her with your dazzling wit and irresistible personality? Xiao Yuan couldn't help but chuckle. Nothing quite so dramatic. Let's just say I made an impression. As the bus rumbled along, Xiao Yuan's thoughts drifted back to the interview. The sleek, modern office, the sterile scent of antiseptic, the uncomfortable pressure of Miss Shin's scrutiny. She remembered the way her palms had sweated, the slight tremor in her voice as she answered the barrage of questions. Yet, amidst the anxiety, there had been a strange sense of calm. A voice, deep within her, whispering that she was capable, that she deserved to be there. She had been honest, perhaps brutally so, about her flaws, about her lack of experience in certain areas. But she had also highlighted her strengths, her resourcefulness, her willingness to learn. She thought about Chengji, his quiet confidence, the almost paternal way he had encouraged her. His words echoed in her mind, a bolstering reassurance against the rising tide of self-doubt. See, go, you skipped approval and spoke directly with the designer. Miss Shin's voice, sharp and laced with disapproval, had cut through the air like a knife. Xiao Yuan had flinched, the blood rushing to her cheeks. Chu just thought it would be more efficient, she stammered, the words catching in her throat. I mainly hope to cooperate with Door Capital, so the conditions. The unspoken threat hung heavy in the air. Xiao Yuan's heart pounded in her chest, a frantic drumbeat against the backdrop of the city's relentless hum. I warned you, Miss Shin continued, her voice cold and unforgiving. Don't come crying to me later. The words had stung, a harsh reminder of the precariousness of her position. But they had also ignited a spark of defiance within her. She wouldn't cry. She would fight. She would prove them wrong. The bus lurched to a stop, jolting Xiao Yuan back to the present. She stepped off, the cool evening air a welcome reprieve from the stuffy confines of the bus. As she walked towards her apartment, the city lights blurring into a kaleidoscope of color, a sense of weary determination settled over her. She had battles to fight, challenges to overcome. But she wasn't afraid. She was ready. So, her mother said, her voice laced with a mixture of concern and skepticism, this interview. How did it go? Xiao Yuan met her mother's gaze, a small, almost imperceptible smile playing on her lips. It weighs in experience, she replied, choosing her words carefully. Her mother frowned, her eyes searching Xiao Yuan's face for any hint of discouragement. An experience? What does that mean? Did you get the job? Xiao Yuan paused, letting the silence hang in the air for a beat. Not yet, she finally admitted. Her mother's face fell, a mixture of disappointment and resignation clouding her features. Oh, Xiao Yuan, she sighed, her voice laced with worry. What will you do now? Xiao Yuan reached out, taking her mother's hand in hers. Don't worry, Mom, she said, her voice firm and reassuring. I'll figure it out. I always do. There was a new steel in her voice, a newfound resolve that surprised even herself. The day's events, the chaotic interview, Miss Shin's harsh words, had chipped away at her insecurities, revealing a core of strength she hadn't known she possessed. She thought of Shenhe, a phantom presence whose actions had rippled through the day's events, a reminder of the unseen forces that shaped their lives. She thought of Han Wang and Deng, their business dealings a stark contrast to her own struggles. She thought of Zhou, a name whispered on the wind, a hint of possibilities yet to unfold. You know, a colleague said, their voice breaking through the quiet hum of the office as Xiao Yuan gathered her things, preparing to leave for the day, I heard about your interview with Miss Shin. Tough cookie, that one. Xiao Yuan nodded, a wry smile tugging at the corner of her lips. That's one way to put it. The colleague leaned closer, lowering their voice. Don't take it personally. She's like that with everyone. Even Li Wei treads carefully around her. Xiao Yuan hummed in acknowledgement, her gaze drifting towards the window, the city lights twinkling like a million scattered diamonds against the darkening sky. President Ho strode past, a fleeting figure of power and authority, his presence a reminder of the hierarchical world she was navigating. She thought of Yan Xiaochen, her audacious pursuit of a free meal, a strange reflection of her own ambition, her own hunger for something more. She wouldn't be deterred. She would keep pushing, keep striving, keep fighting for her place in this complex, chaotic world.